I wish I could stop using my hands when I talk, but it's never gonna happen, and you guys are gonna have to live with it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So I wanted to talk about predictability in books and why I personally do not think predictability is really that bad. Now, I know this is subjective and everybody has their own opinions, but I at least want to plead my case as to why I think predictability isn't such a bad thing. And what you'll notice is that a lot of people actually do like predictability in certain genres, but just in general. And one of the genres is romance. But before I go any further, I do want to read this quote that I came across from Bilinguistics, a website on speech therapy. And this one quote says, "Predictable books make use of rhyme, repetition of words, phrases, sentences, and refrains in such patterns as cumulative structure, repeated scenes, familiar cultural sequences, interlocking structure, and turnaround plots. These stories invite children to make predictions or guess about words, phrases, sentences, events, and characters that could come next in the story." And this was said by Mary Jett Simmons in 1986 in Reading Resource Books. Now, what happens is we see is that repetition or predictability in books is used to help children remember the stories that are being told to them and to help them learn. But also, one thing I hear a lot of people complain about in books is predictability in adult books or books that kids usually won't read. And I want to kind of say why I think that predictability isn't so bad and that we shouldn't put unpredictability on a high pedestal. Now, I know a lot of people like knowing what's not coming, but for some readers, and this is also sometimes myself, depending on what I'm reading, I like to know what's coming next. But also, there is this deep satisfaction that I get when I figure out what I'm reading. And I'll tell you why. So if you say a writer is writing something predictable, it doesn't necessarily mean that what they're writing is bad or it was poorly executed. What I like to think of it as is that you're picking up what the author is putting down. You were able to see what they were trying to create and you got it. And it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. So predictability doesn't always have to be something that is negative. It can be something good. I think that predictability can also be an indication of a story flowing well and that it is great storytelling. I don't necessarily think that a book being unpredictable makes it much better than a book that is predictable. And again, I said this is subjective, but I think it's something to think about when we put books on a pedestal because the ending was something that we didn't predict. Now, previously in my second video that I did, I gave a review on Legendborn by Tracey Deonn. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful book. I cannot praise it enough. But I did mention that I kind of did guess what was going to happen. But I didn't know how Tracey Deonn was going to execute it. And so I think what is very important when we're predicting the end of a book, a conclusion, we should watch how the execution is taking place, because I think that's sometimes what matters more than perhaps you figured it out. But also I feel like that my third eye is wide open when I finally have figured out what's going on and that I'm able to piece together what the author has written, and I'm seeing this book in the light that they would have preferred me to see it as. So I think it's just something to think about, that perhaps maybe predictability isn't such a bad thing, and that predictability can also be very comforting. One of the reasons that a lot of people read romance, even myself, is that I enjoy the predictability. I know at the end of the day, the book that I'm reading, these couples, whatever happens, they're going to get together. Something is going to work out, and there is comfort in knowing what comes next. I think it's really important for us to disabuse ourselves of the notions that unpredictability is inherently more worthy than books that we may consider predictable, because then it excludes books that have probably been executed in such a great way with very unique and interesting perspectives for the sake of just saying they're predictable and then assuming predictability is bad. I think it's great that a lot of us, when we're reading, we want to have endings that we didn't expect. It kind of adds like a special kick and a special punch, but sometimes books that have unexpected endings can also not be good books, because everything, again, like I have said before in this video, comes down to execution, how it is written, how everything is carried out, and how the author pieces everything together, and if it flows well. So I believe that if you feel like something is predictable, or you predicted it and you foresaw it coming, then maybe you are noticing that this is really good storytelling, and it is an indication of a flow that the author has established. And so I think this is a reason why we should kind of take away the idea of unpredictability being on a pedestal and being better than predictability. But I think at the end of the day, it matters how this author carried this out and if it makes sense the way that they do it, because there can be books that are unpredictable, and that ending that you didn't expect, it doesn't really make sense, and it kind of shakes up the flow, and it's not necessarily good storytelling. And so I think we should all give a second chance or a third chance, or any chances that we can, to books that we may consider predictable. But also, what does predictability mean, right? And so I think we should ask ourselves that and kind of give these predictable books a chance. And as we read, think differently about the stories that we are consuming, and if they flow in a way that allow the storytelling to be strong. Well, thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate your time, because I understand time is very precious. But thank you for listening to me ramble about my thoughts. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit subscribe. And I can't wait to talk about more book-related things. Bye.